Howdy-ho, Arkansas Pilgrim here again. Well, we're on to the next stage of this project, which is to make tooling, or a jig, for a box joint made out of 3/4 inch material. Now, I'll tell you right up front, you'll probably find better instructions on how to build a box joint jig and how to make a box joint on other parts of the internet. No, not probably. You will find better instructions by people that have more experience than me, because I have no experience at all. But this, I think, will be helpful, because doing something for the first time is different than doing it and having the courage to go ahead and do it yourself, or to work up the gumption to do it. It's nice when you see somebody that's not a pro at it, because, well, they already know what they're doing and they make it look so easy, and it's not always that easy. So box joints look best when the what do you call them? The tabs are square on the end, so that they're the same thickness as the material. And since I'm making my bee supers out of 3/4 inch material, I need to make a jig that uses 3/4 inch material. If you remember, bee supers are just boxes to hold beehive frames. We're going to have to make the jig first, because the jig makes it easy to make a regular cut, evenly spaced, all the same size. And to do that, we need to make the exact cut on the jig that we're going to be making on the material. And that's easy. This is best done using a dado blade. A dado is basically a slot. That's a fancy word for a slot, a square slot in a board. I have what's called a wobble blade. This is not the best way to make dados, but so what it does, it fits on like this, and as it cuts, it wobbles around and slices out a slot. Problem is, it makes kind of a slightly rounded bottom instead of square, and but this is what I have to use right now. There are other dado sets that come as multiple blades, 2 big blades, and then chipper blades in between, and you take out the chippers and you add shims to get the right width you want. Well, I can't use that on my table saw, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. The other option is a dado set that's one piece. Well, it's multiple pieces, but it doesn't come apart. You dial it and it changes the thickness. That's the best, but they're the better part of $300. And to be honest with you, if I'm going to spend $300 on something, I'm going to spend $300 as part of the cost of a new table saw. And, well, we might as well go into that now. So here's my table saw. And there is the shaft, or the arbor as it's known as. And the problem with this table saw is that you'll note right here, that's called the shoulder. It's solid. That's where the blade slips on nice and tight through the hole in the center of the blades, of any blade you put on here. And then there's a washer nut tightened down on it. Well, the problem is these threads. These threads, if you'll note, they look like regular threads, like on a bolt. And because of that, they're actually a smaller diameter than this, which means parts of the dado blade can be kind of loose on them instead of nice and a tight sliding fit like on here. What it should have is actually a what's called a square thread, or at least something similar. It's actually similar to this that you see on a C-clamp. You'll notice the tops of the threads are flat. It's the rod that it was cut into is, you've got the full diameter of the rod, and then with teeth or threads cut into it. But the top of the teeth are the same diameter as the original rod that they were cut into. When you had something like that, you'd have the shoulder and the top of the teeth the same diameter, and a dado stack set of loose blades would fit on tightly. And if you use it in this case, the chippers that are in between the full blades, they end up sitting at different heights as the blade rotates, and you end up with a rough bottom, a series of steps on the bottom of your dado, instead of a nice, smooth, perfect, square cut flat bottom slot. Anyway, that's one of the issues with this table saw. And that's why, like I said, I'm using this wobble blade and just having to deal with it. Okay, so now I will show you what goes into the adjusting of this. I've got it's a trial and error process. You always should do test cuts on anything you're making anyway, just to, on scrap pieces of material. That's what these are for. But this one's it's especially true. You have to loosen the blade. It's tightened in here, and then you rotate along the edge here. I'm not sure if it's showing, how well this is showing up, but it gives you a rough idea of how wide the slot's going to be. We're going for full 3/4, so I'm going to bottom it out. There's the mark. It says it's 3/4. Who knows what it actually is? That seems kind of tight. We'll see. And yes, this is from Harbor Freight, but it's I've never had a problem with it yet, but we will see. So we'll put it on. And because of the way motors turn, the threads are left-handed threads backwards, so as it spins it'll actually make things tight, so you got to do everything backwards. Yes, here we go. I actually have a proper piece of scrap. Can't put this in because it's got this big wide blade. Okay, let me go ahead and plug the table saw in, because you can never have it plugged in here. Messing around with the blade. My hearing protection on. Eye protection on first. Hearing protection. And here we go. I'm going to dial. We're going to adjust just the width first is what we're going for, and we'll deal with the depth second. Go. Actually, if you look close, you can see that the bottom there's a little curve to it. It's not that big a deal, especially for what we're doing, for making these V-supers. But let's see. These little steel rulers are handy. That's showing it's about at 3/4, but there's something more important than this, and that is the actual material you're using. Okay, now let's put the jig together, and I'm copying it off the internet. And let's see, let's move this over a little bit, dropping too many things off on the floor. We have to cut 2 of those slots in here, just like we would if on a piece that we were actually making the box joint. There. Now we can make sure we're actually getting our thing put together in the right. Gives us something. Sometimes we measure wrong. Making sure we measure right first. Okay, this is going to be need to be cut here, but first needs to be attached to this. And actually, the one online actually uses 2 of these. So I'm actually just going to set up another follower over here, but we'll do that last. That's one of the problems with a wobble dado blade is you don't exactly know where it is. So in this case, it's not critical anyway for the jig, but it would be nice. And no, I didn't unplug. Now I'm unplugged. And I'm just eyeballing this from the top to see where it reaches its widest point. Looks kind of right there. That's pretty close. So there. It's back here on the back. Sorry about the backlit, but we've got holes here specifically designed for screwing a fence or a backstop, or what do you want to call it. So I'm going to drill some holes in here and screw it in. Okay, what I'm going to do first, I'm going to tell you and then show you. I'm going to use a drill bit this barely fits in here to go in and mark the spots that I've already set, because it's in exactly the spot I want it. Just mark the spots for drilling so I can get the screws nice and centered. And then I'll take this off and drill the holes. Be careful not to drive them in too deep, because it's particle board and it will strip. Especially if you're using a regular drill. You don't want to use a regular drill. You want to finish off by hand tightening them, because a regular drill will just keep on going. This just, because of the impact, it just goes and fits and starts. Now what we have to do is put a tab, a piece of wood in here. It'll be used. We can just step by step go through.